Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I thought it would be fun to show you how I used some small border dies or belly band dies to create a background die cut look that looks like it's one big die, the big cover plate dies, but we're just going to use our small border dies to create this look. So let's get started by creating the background for this card. Got the Shaded Lilac and the Villainous Potion Distress Oxide inks from Tim Holtz, and I've also got a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. Now I've cut this down to 3 5/8 by 4 1/4. That will fit the border die that I'm using, so I just thought it would be easier if the length of the cardstock and the length of the die matched up perfectly, just to make this easier, but you certainly don't have to do it that way. You can just cut this down when you're done gluing everything together, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So now I've added that lighter shaded lilac first. I've got a large blending brush, and then I added the darker Villainous Potion, and then I'm going back to that lighter color and just blending this out. So I kind of want some light and dark areas. And then I'm going to take the Doc P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White ink. This is a nice bright white ink, and I'm going to place a little on my glass media mat. I'm spritzing that with a little bit of water, and then I'll go ahead and spatter this panel. Now that's just going to brighten up the background a little bit, and we are going to add some more spattering to this. So all of this will create a really interesting background. I've got my heat tool, which is a lower heat, and I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to come in with the Distress Spritz, and this is the Villainous Potion, so it'll tie in nicely with the Oxide ink that we have on this panel. You want to shake that up really well, and then I'm going to just dip that nozzle right into the container and spatter it that way, and that is going to give us a beautiful shimmer. And I'm going to heat set that as well. Again, I'm using that heat tool to do that, and you can see that shimmer. I hope you can see that beautiful shimmer that you get. So let's go to the Decorative Belly Bands die set. This comes with that pretty scalloped rectangle and these 3 little border dies or belly band dies. Again, you can use your border dies or your belly band dies, whatever you prefer. But I did want to show you what the 3 of these in this set look like. So I went ahead and die cut those just so you could get a better look at them, and I'm selecting this one to be our background on our card. So I die cut several of these. In the end, I did use 7 of them for this particular panel, but you will want to determine how many you need depending on the size of your background panel that you're going to be creating. So I've got some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'm going to apply that all over. Just little tiny dots of that adhesive all around the background. And then I'm going to attach this. Now you do want to make sure you line that up nice and straight. Everything from here on up will be based on that first one that you lay down. So you want to make sure your background panel is nice and straight. And then you want to start off with that first border die being perfectly straight. And then from then on, it's just a matter of lining them up one next to the other. So I'm just going to butt those up against each other, and you can already start to see how that is going to give us the look of one large die. So I went and attached all of those, and there's the last one, and I just think this is so pretty. And what's really nice about this is you can create your own background. So I know we all have tons of border dies, and it's really fun to create the look that you want to achieve. So dig through your dies, see what you have, and see what you can put together, because this was really fun to do. Now I did cut a piece of black 100-pound cardstock, just slightly larger than this panel, which measures 3 7/8 by 4 1/2. So that'll give us a little border of that black all the way around. Let's let that dry. Now for the card base, I'm going to create a standard A2 size top folding card. So this measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I've scored it at 5 1/2 inches. And I'm just pressing that out with my bone folder. Now I'll take the nested heart dies and I'm going to take that largest plain heart and the next one down. And we're going to create a layered look. I want to create a black layer just like we did for our card. And then the white piece is where we're going to stamp some beautiful florals. So let's go ahead and run those through the Spellbinders Platinum Scout machine. For the floral stamping, I'm using those beautiful irises. And this is the Tulip floral set from Art Impressions. And look at these beautiful sentiments that you have. We're going to be using that one that says thinking of you, but there's several on there that you could select. And so I'm going to line up that stamp. Let's first place that heart in our MISTI stamp positioner. I just used a little bit of the Tombow mono glue tape to tape that down temporarily while we do our stamping. And then I'm going to line this up. So I'm pulling it down, and I want it to kind of look like the flowers are coming up from the bottom. So I'm just going to use the very top of that stamp. I'll go ahead and ink that up with the Versafine Onyx Black ink, and then we can go ahead and press that out with the Stampendable stamp press. And now let's do some coloring. To get started, I use the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pen in the yellow. But for the flowers, I'm going to go back to those two ink pads that we used to create our background. I'm going to go back to the shaded Lilac and the Villainous Potion. So again, those are the two colors I used on that background. Because I wanted to get a really nice match. I did dig through my zigs and I couldn't quite find the purple tones that I was looking for, so I thought I'd just go right back to these ink pads. And to do that, I'm just going to place some of that ink right onto my glass medium mat. I'll spritz it with a little bit of water, and then I've got a number 0 paintbrush, and I'm going to drop in that lighter color first. So I've got plenty of water on the brush, but I have that paper towel there in case you want to dab away any of that excess water. And what I'm going to do is once that petal is wet and I have that shaded lilac down, I can just drop in some of that darker color, and it kind of moves around a little bit on its own, which is really nice. It gives you a really pretty blend. So what I like to do is just kind of do all the petals, and then I can come back to them and add layers of color. You could even let them dry a little bit and then come back with your darker shadowing. Sometimes if it's too wet, you don't get that shadowing that you're looking for. And I'm not an expert on this. This just works for me, so you may want to, play around with it and see what look you like the best. You could certainly use your Zig markers here or your Tombow markers if you prefer that. But again, I was looking for a nice match of color, and I thought this was really fun to do. And as far as watercoloring goes, this was really simple. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't time consuming. There was just a few of these flowers to color in. So you can see I'm kind of just dropping that color in, adding a little bit more of the darker color, trying to avoid that area in the center of the flower, but we'll do a little bit of blending right up to that yellow. And later on, we'll add a little bit of the Wink of Stella clear glitter pen over the top of these, so it'll give it a nice shimmer and a little bit of a glittery look. So once I finished coloring in the flowers, I went back to the Zig markers and I took the light green and the green to color in these stems. And then I'll use my Zig blender pen to blend those out. So again, some simple coloring. And do keep in mind that all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. And I also want to thank all of you who use those links to make a purchase. I do receive a small commission, but it is at no additional cost to you, so I really do appreciate when you do that. It does help to support my channel. So let's finish coloring up these leaves, and then we can go ahead and attach this to that black heart that we die cut. And again, that'll frame this nicely. Now before we add this panel, I want to stamp my sentiment. So I'm just going to position that panel on the card, And I want that sentiment to be down towards the lower right-hand corner. So I'll just position this temporarily just to see where that stamp needs to be. And again, I'm grabbing the one that says thinking of you. And let's go ahead and quickly stamp that on the front of the card. Going back to that same ink that we used before. You could certainly stamp the sentiment in one of those purpley colors as well. That would be really pretty, but I thought the black kind of tied into the black borders we've created. Now I've got the velvet trims in the cool colors from the Holtz idea-ology, and I'm going to grab that purple. I just thought that was so beautiful with this. And it just adds some more interest in texture with that pretty velvet. And I'm going to just wrap that around the center of this panel. So let's go back to that Tombow mono tape and wrap this around. And I'm just trying to figure out where the middle is. So I've got 7 of them, so around 3.5. And I'm going to wrap that right around. And then once I've done that, we'll pop this up on the card. And I've got some 3D foam tape that we'll add to both of these pieces. So let's go ahead and add that to the back of this panel. I am going to avoid the area where the velvet trim is. I don't want it to get too bulky there, so I'll just go above it and below it, and that'll keep our card nice and level. And then I'll just add one piece right down the center. And that'll keep this popped up nicely. Let's go ahead and remove the backing. I'm using the Cricut weeding tool. I just use that little pokey end just to pull off the backing. And then we can place this on the card, and I'm placing it up towards the top. I'll have an equal amount on the 2 sides and the top. And then for the heart, we're going to do the same thing. We're going back to that foam tape, and I don't want to add anywhere that velvet trim is. So I'm going to place the tape on the top of the heart and on the very bottom of the heart. And that will leave that center area open for that velvet trim to fit in there nicely. So once we have that in place, let's add a few pretty gems to this just to give a little bit more sparkle. And I've got the Pinkfresh Studio Gems. These are called Ice. These are really pretty. Again, it adds a little interest and sparkle without adding any additional color. You could certainly use some purple sequins or gems, but I just thought this ice would just give it a soft look and just keep it a little bit more elegant looking. So I'm going to glue 3 of those down in that upper left-hand side of the heart. And I've got a small, medium, and large one. And then I've taken 2 of the smaller ones, and I'll place 2 in the bottom right-hand corner and 2 in that upper left-hand corner. Now you have a lot of options for placing these little gems on this panel, because you could place one in the center of each of those little flower shapes. But I just thought a few additional ones would be just right. And then here's where I'm adding that Wink of Stella clear glitter pen that I mentioned before, and that'll add some pretty sparkle to these. Just be careful when you're adding this, because you've already done all that blending and you don't want to move that ink around too much. So I'm just kind of like very lightly applying it. You can even just sort of dab it on. So let me give you a closer look at our finished card, and you have that pretty background, and I wish you could see the shimmer a little bit more from that Distress Spritz, but in person it is really beautiful. And we've got that gorgeous stamp set. I love the irises. I just think they're so pretty. So if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. And also leave me a comment. I love to read your comments. And I really appreciate you joining me today. And I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.